So in January of 1985, after I had only been in New York City for about 4 months, friends of my wife introduced me to the art director from FAZ named Hans-Georg Pospischil. And we had a wonderful lunch on Columbus Avenue. And as we started talking and I was showing him pictures, he said, you know, I would like you to work for us. And I said, wonderful. And he brings out a list. And on the list is a number of stories that they have in mind that they want to do. And at the very top of the list is the name Charles Bukowski. And he says, you know, for 6 years we have been trying to do this story. And every time we send a photographer or every time we make a request, he hangs up the phone, he's thrown photographers down the stairs, and we get nowhere. And I said, well, by coincidence, a really good friend of mine, who is a book and art dealer, helped his publisher, John Martin, at Black Sparrow Press, at a moment where they were going to go out of business. He bought everything they had, and they got started again. So what I know is Bukowski and his publisher owe a big favor to my friend. So I call my friend, Arthur Feldman. I call my friend Arthur, and I tell him the story that these friends want to do a story about Bukowski. And I says, can you help me get in the door? And he says, I don't know, let me see what I can do. So he calls up the publisher, who calls up Bukowski. He calls me back within 5 minutes. He says, here's the number, you're in. So I went, oh, fantastic. So I go out to California, and it's just myself, some cameras, some color film, some black and white film. And for 2.5 days, Bukowski and I are sitting and drinking and laughing and making pictures and having a wonderful time. And I'm thinking, I've got a story. So I send the story back to Germany when I get back to New York, and I get no answer. After a week, after 10 days, nothing. So I finally called them, and I said, so did you get my pictures? And they say, yes. Hans-Georg says, I did, but I won't talk to you on the phone. I'm coming to New York about something else, and we get together. So we make an appointment at a wonderful hotel called the Algonquin, and at 9 in the morning, I'm waiting for Hans-Georg to come down the stairs, and he comes down the stairs with my little manila envelope with all my pictures, and he throws it on the floor, and he says, Scheisse. And I knew at that moment this was definitely not a good response. But he sits me down, and he starts giving me this wonderful lecture that completely changed my life. And it was a lecture about the fact that the magazine that his company puts out every Friday is this wonderful island that people can go to get them away from the daily news, which is all noise and chaos. And they want to go to this peaceful island to get away from all this. He says, the pictures you sent us, they're photographically fine, but they're just information. They're just not enough. What you need to do is make images of the mythos of this man. You need to make the pictures that will define him for 10 years before you got there and continue to define him at least for 10 years after you leave. And I said to Hans-Georg, how can I do that? He says, that's your problem. And he says, on top of that, when people look at a magazine, they open a page and they maybe look at each picture for 1/4 of a second. Your job is to make them look at your pictures for at least a half a second. And that'll be the beginning of their connection to the story, and they'll want to go deeper. So my next biggest obstacle was to call Bukowski, who I'd had such a good time. We both were born in Germany. We had all this common ground. We had been drinking together and had a real connection. And I said, Hank, it's Abe. And you're not going to believe it, but they want more pictures. And he goes, more pictures? We gave them enough pictures to do 20 stories. We were shooting for 3.5 days. What is wrong with them? And I started to explain everything, and I finally said, listen, Bukowski, here's the story. If I don't make these pictures again, I probably won't eat for the rest of my life. I will have no roof over my head, and it'll be your fucking fault. So I'm coming out whether you like it or not. You give me a date, and it's done, and we'll do it again. So he says, all right, punk. And he gives me a date, 10 o'clock, Tuesday morning, 2 weeks, you be there. So 2 weeks go by, I practice with a lighting guy and with all kinds of equipment. And we arrive and knock on his door, and Bukowski opens the door, and he goes, who the fuck are you? And I know he's pulling my leg, and he says, I'm still a little drunk from last night. Give me a couple of hours. You go set up everything, and I'll be ready. So then 2 hours later, he comes down, and his hair is all wet from the shower, and he's got a T-shirt on, and he tears the T-shirt, and he holds out a big knife, and he holds it in front of my face and says, is this what these fucking krauts want? And I said, perfect, we're shooting. And so that completely changed the way I approached photography for magazines. You needed a level deeper than just information.